Greetings, everyone. My name is Ayana Omilade Fluellen, and today I'm going to share with you the amazing work that I'm doing alongside with Diving with a Purpose. Diving with a Purpose, or DWP as I'll say for the duration of this presentation, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the conservation and protection of submerged heritage resources. DWP provides education, training, certification, and field school experience to adults and youth in the fields of maritime archaeology and ocean conservation. DWP has a special focus in the protection, documentation, and interpretation of African slave trade shipwrecks and the maritime history and culture of African Americans who formed a core of the labor and expertise for America's maritime enterprises. What makes the organization so unique is how it's comprised predominantly of recreational scuba divers of African descent, with no formal training in maritime archaeology or coral reef restoration. DWP has partnered with national and international organizations, gaining professional skills that have afforded them opportunities to aid in the restoration of coral reefs around the world and the documentation of maritime heritage sites associated with the African and African diaspora internationally. The slogan of the organization is restoring our oceans and preserving our history. The rhetoric within the slogan invokes a sense of stewardship to the natural and cultural environment which its membership really holds. DWP divers are environmental stewards of the ocean and cultural stewards to African diaspora maritime heritage sites. Diving with a Purpose is a volunteer underwater archaeology program that started with members of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers and the National Park Service in Biscayne National Park. Biscayne National Park is the largest marine park in the national park system and has over 110 archaeological sites, approximately 43 of which are intact shipwrecks. And these shipwrecks tell a compelling story of the nation's rich maritime and cultural heritage. Since the organization's founding, we've trained over 300 divers through our PADI certification course in maritime archaeology advocacy, with 46 participants becoming instructors. The organization as a whole has documented 18 shipwrecks, worked in 6 different countries, and logged over 18,000 volunteer hours. DWP offers training opportunities in Maritime Archaeology Training Program, our Coral Reef Restoration Program, and our Youth Diving with a Purpose program. DWP has worked with the National Park Service and NOAA and the Slave Wrecks Project, aiding in coral reef restoration and the documentation of submerged heritage resources around the world, as well as providing training to divers to carry out specialized work. For the past 16 years, DWP has offered a week-long maritime advocacy training program to skilled divers, teaching them the basics of maritime archaeology survey. This experience is truly intergenerational. The photo on the slide is a picture of me participating in my first DWP experience in 2017, where I worked alongside Gail Patrick, a renowned architect who is in her 70s and still actively diving. DWP trains experienced divers, including youth, to become underwater archaeology advocates. Through the program, divers are able to assist in the historical documentation and preservation of artifacts and wreck sites. The program helps to perform a congressionally mandated condition assessment of archaeological sites within the park's boundaries. DWP performs extensive underwater archaeological documentation of these shipwrecks, surveys their condition, and develops detailed maps of the wreck sites. The program also attempts to interpret and understand the historical context in which these ships existed. DWP believes it's important to document these historical sites while they still exist. The sites are subject to the ever-changing environment, both man-made and natural. Sites have been looted of their vulnerable artifacts and damaged by storms and time on the ocean floor. The shipwreck data collected serves as a vital educational resource for local communities that will tell the story of these vessels and the role they played in the nation's maritime heritage. Documenting these sites allows the rich history to be shared for generations to come. Following the Maritime Archaeology Training Program, DWP hosts another training in coral restoration, and participants in this training learn how to spot various types of coral, document noticeable damage and disease seen on stony corals, and clean and outplant staghorn coral. Founding members of the organization have been diving in Key Largo as part of DWP summer training program for over 15 years. During the time, many have seen personal, firsthand accounts the impact of human pollution and climate change on the ocean, specifically the coral reefs that wrap around the Florida Keys, which have significantly been impacted by stony coral tissue loss disease since 2014. For the organization, Diving with a Purpose extends to caring for the ocean through ongoing coral restoration efforts. The organization sees coral restoration as a component of maritime conservation that aids in combating the impact humans have had on the sustainability of shallow water coral reefs. The participants from each program earn a PADI certification card at the end of the training. Divers who repeatedly attend DWP trainings are able to qualify to participate in programs that we have ongoing around the world. And one such program is the Tuskegee Airmen Project, which is in partnership with the state of Michigan and NOAA. A small team consisting of DWP members and NOAA personnel assembled in August of 2015 to document an airplane wreck site in Lake Huron in Port Huron, Michigan. The airplane is one of 14 known wreck sites in the Great Lakes that were flown by Tuskegee Airmen who trained over the lakes before being deployed overseas in the second half of World War II. Images on the far left and right show mapping and recovery efforts of the aircraft. During the middle years of World War II, Michigan was home to several African American air combat units, including many graduates of the Tuskegee Pilot Training Program. Upon completion of advanced training in Michigan, many Tuskegee Airmen were immediately deployed to combat support missions in Italy, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. Two Tuskegee Airmen plane wrecks were discovered in the Michigan area, and the airplane recovered in 2015 was flown by Lieutenant Frank Moody, featured in the middle of the slide, and was discovered in Lake Huron on April 11, 2014, 70 years to the day of the accident. Additionally, DWP is actively working alongside the Slave Wrecks Project, and the Slave Wrecks Project is an international network of researchers and institutions hosted by the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in collaboration with the George Washington University Ezekiel Museums of South Africa, the U.S. National Park Service, and Diving with a Purpose that studies the history of the transatlantic slave trade in its wake. DWP's role within the Slave Wrecks Project has been primarily to aid in the documentation of shipwrecks involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Additionally, DWP has worked to train local monitors in scuba techniques, as well as maritime advocacy, so that local community members have the skills to be stewards of their submerged heritage resources. And DWP is currently working with the Slave Wrecks Project in Senegal, Mozambique, and South Africa. And those were just some of the adult programs that DWP offers. Youth Diving with a Purpose programs provide the same training opportunities for youth ages 16 through 23. Youth Diving with a Purpose participants gather in the Biscayne National Park and learn underwater archaeology with DWP instructors. The mission of Youth Diving with a Purpose goes beyond underwater archaeology education, as we are always looking for ways to challenge the interest and broaden knowledge related to our vast aquatic environment. And you can see here on the slide just a short clip of some of the student participants that we've had doing this work in the National Park Service. One of the most progressive aspects of DWP's work is how they have managed to carve out a space for themselves in the field of maritime archaeology. Maritime archaeology historically has been predominantly white and hasn't been inclusive of racial minorities and those of low socioeconomic status. In 1997, Dr. Miriam Franklin wrote, "Why are there so few Black American archaeologists?" Archaeologists Really, in this article, she stated main reasons that African Americans did not participate in the field of archaeology was due to the prohibitive cost of training and education in the field. And Dr. Franklin was talking specifically about the lack of racial diversity in the field of terrestrial archaeology. However, maritime archaeology lags far behind terrestrial archaeology in regards to racial and class diversity among its practitioners. DWP has created pathways for stakeholder community members around the world to become trained cultural stewards of their submerged heritage resources, while also training formally educated terrestrial archaeologists of African descent to do maritime archaeology. DWP's training programs are an active redress, accounting for the disparities in access to formal and informal education in maritime archaeology and advocacy for people of color. These training opportunities have provided avenues of possibility for underrepresented academic populations to gain entryway into the field where traditional pathways are foreclosed to them. And if you'd like to learn more about us, please check out our resources here. And of course, thank you to everyone that made this possible.